Department, social issues editor at the Washington Post, which is a charter sponsor of the National Book Festival. First, a word of thanks to the co-chairman of the festival, David Rubenstein, and the other generous sponsors who've made this event possible. If you'd like to add your financial support, please note the information in your program. We'll have some time after this presentation for questions, and I've been asked to remind you that if you come to the microphone, you will be included in the videotape of this event, which may broadcast later. I'm happy to introduce you today young adult fiction author, David Levithan. David has been a pioneer in expanding the role of gay characters in teen literature. His first novel, Boy Meets Boy, started as a story he wrote for friends for Valentine's Day. His other acclaimed fiction includes Every Day, Another Day, and Two Boys Kissing. His best-selling collaborations include Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlists, written with Rachel Cohn, and Will Grayson, written with John Green. His latest novel is Sam and Elsa's Last Hurrah, also written with Rachel Cohn. In 2016, David was named the recipient of the Margaret A. Edwards Award for his contribution to young adult literature. His forthcoming book for young adults is Someday. When not writing during spare hours on weekends, Levithan is editorial director at Scholastic and the founding editor of the Push imprint, which is devoted to finding new voices and new authors in teen literature. And here he is.
Hello, everybody. All right, so first things first. So I apologize if you've never seen me speak before. This is Ninja. He always takes a picture with the audience. It's good. My family is sitting in the front, so they'll get to be pictured. All right? Don't try to upstage Ninja. That always goes badly. All right, and we'll do this. Okay. There we go. Now the business is done. We can begin. So thank you for coming out here to hear me talk for a little bit. I like the Q&A part better than just me talking, so I'll try to get through this part fairly quickly, and hopefully you guys will be thinking of lots of cues for me to A, or else it'll be horribly awkward for us all. I'm going to talk very briefly about collaboration. Of the many things I do as a writer and as an editor, collaboration is really one of the things I love to do the most. And the two new books that I have are collaborations in very different ways. Oh man, I was so excited that I wasn't up there, and now there's just me gesturing behind me. So my most recent book that is actually out and in stores is Sam and Elsa's Last Hurrah. It is a book, the fifth book that I wrote with Rachel Cohn. And just very briefly, how Rachel and I do it is we come up with a premise. So for this one, it was Toxic Dinner Party. The idea was it's twins, Sam and Ilsa, brother and sister. They're about to graduate high school, and they're having their last dinner party, and they're each allowed to invite 3 people, but the other one is not allowed to know who's coming. So you can imagine this setup is exactly how it was writing the book, that Rachel had her character and she was inviting her 3 characters that I didn't know about, and I had my character and I was inviting 3 people that Rachel didn't know about. We never plot out our books ahead of time. We live them alongside the characters. Whatever happens just happens, and we pass chapters back and forth. So for this one, I would write a Sam chapter, email it to Rachel. She'd write an Ilsa chapter, email it back to me. We never talk about it. We never can sort of say, why did you do that? Let's change it. We just run with whatever the other person does. We are such good friends and have collaborated again for 5 books now that we know each other's tricks, and so now we're trying to do tricks on top of tricks. So I just wanted to give you an illustration of how this works. So the first passage, I'm sure much to Rachel's chagrin, I'm going to read is from her chapter. So this is her first chapter, and this is her introducing the people who are going to be attending as Ilsa's guests. One of them, it's this. Frederick Polansky, a.k.a. Freddie, the wild card. He's an exchange student from Poland living with a family on the Upper East Side. I met him when I was with my best friend watching hot guys play basketball in Central Park. Tall, blonde, muscled, deep blue eyes, uncomplicated. I'm pretty sure Freddie's the guy I've been looking for, the one who will break my brother's heart. All right, challenge laid down. So I'm given this character, and then I have to then introduce this character. So think about the paragraph that Rachel, that's all we know about Freddie. So what are the obvious ways to go with that? Where would you run with that? Now you will get the answer to where I ran with this. So this is 3 chapters later, the doorbell rings. I figure it's going to be Jason, but when I open the door, there's no light up here for me to read by, it's really amusing. I find someone who is not even remotely Jason. On the hotness scale, Jason may have been a firecracker, but this guy's the sun. He is wearing clothes, but my body reacts like he isn't. My gaze rises from his strong shoulders to focus on his face. Hello, I say, and it sounds like hell because the O comes out too low, so I did it wrong. It's hello. I see he has one of our invitations in his hand. This has to be one of Ilsa's guests. Then his other hand gets my attention because it has a sock on it. A white tube sock with green button eyes, and a red marker mouth, and brown yarn hair. I hope we're in the right place, the sock says. It has a disturbingly attractive voice, English as a second language with sexy beast being the first. Excuse me? I say, because 9 out of 10 times when you're confronted with a sock puppet, that is the only valid response. This is Ilsa's party, isn't it? The sock continues. I look up at the godlike guy, and his lips aren't moving. It is Ilsa's party, I say. I am not talking to the hand. I'm talking to the hot guy who is looking at me like his hand isn't talking to me. I'm her brother, Sam. Nice to meet you, the sock says. It holds out its hand, which is his pinky, under a sock. I look at the guy as if to say, you can't be serious, and he looks back at me as if to say, this is my life choice and you must respect it. I shake the sock's hand pinky. I'm Caspian, it says. This is Frederick. He met Ilsa when he was playing basketball. I'm not allowed to accompany him on the court, so I missed the chance to meet her. But I'm very happy to meet you now. Come in, I say. Please. Collaboration, isn't it great? So that is how we work. If she sends me a hot guy, I add a sock puppet. And vice versa. And really, the joy of writing with somebody else is that you are living the story alongside them and you don't know where it's going to go. And you're kind of, in a way, as oblivious as your characters are. As with Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, our first book together and all the ones that have come after, it is about the adventure of meeting people and sort of trying to navigate life through the people you connect with. So the other book, and this is the first time I'm talking about it with it coming out in a month and a day, is Someday, which is the third book in sort of the sequence that started with my book Every Day, which was turned into a movie that was released this spring. So I wrote Every Day. It is, if you are not familiar with it, shame on you. No. If you are not familiar with it, it is about somebody named A who changes bodies every day and lives every day. And lives like this, has been like this since birth, and lives like this, not really connecting to anybody until in their 16th year, they meet somebody named Rhiannon and fall in love. And not just fall in love, but connect with somebody for the first time. And so the book Every Day is about identity. It's about who would you be if you weren't defined by your body, if you weren't seen and defined by gender, by race, by parentage, by any outward feature, if you were just yourself, whatever that is. Often we find there's a disconnect to who we feel we are and what our body looks like, and especially to how it is interpreted by other people looking at us. And so I wanted to talk about that and write about somebody who was purely a self and how they navigate life. I did not think I would write necessarily more, but in writing that story, I was curious about Rhiannon's point of view, and my book, Another Day, is from her point of view with the same circumstances. And that book is about love, and it is about, if you say, oh, I love the you inside, it doesn't matter what you look like, is that true? And we say love conquers all, but society does give us certain pressures, and can love conquer that, and how do you navigate that? So that's what Another Day is about. So this book, Someday, this is the Australian edition, but it's the same cover, so at least it gives you a sense of what it will look like when it comes out on October 2nd, is the culmination of all of these strands. In Every Day, it is not giving away too much to say that we meet somebody who, in Every Day, is in the body of a reverend named Reverend Poole. But it is somebody who, like A, can change bodies. Not necessarily every day, but just jumps from body to body. And what this third book is about choices and moral choices. And the fact that we can get away with something doesn't mean we should necessarily do it. So if A is very, what I would call moral, in that when A is in a body, A does not want to steer it astray, does not want to take advantage of it, does not want to do anything. The character, who we'll call X, inside Reverend Poole's body in the first book and in many different bodies in this new book, is the opposite. It's like, hey, nobody can catch me. I can get away with anything. I can manipulate whatever I want. I can choose who to be, and I want to be powerful and I want to be privileged. And that creates some conflict, to say the least. It is about these two worldviews colliding and trying to navigate that. It is told from at least, I'll say at least 4 perspectives. Part of the, hopefully, interesting part of the book is that you never quite know who is going to be narrating the next chapter. But it really is told from Rhiannon's point of view, Nathan, who's in the first book and in the second book, A, and then this character X. So just to dip into a little bit of evil, I will read a little bit from X's portion and then a little bit from A's portion. So this is X. To stay in a body, you must take that body over. To take a body over, you must kill the person inside. It is not an easy thing to do, to assert your own self over the will that exists in the body, to smother it until it is no longer there. But it can be done. Not a person you'd want inside your body. Meanwhile, A, it's hard to talk about this book without giving the ending of the other book away, but A is a little bit lost and is thinking that A can be separate again, but is not, and says, life is harder when you have someone to miss. I wake up in a suburb of Denver and feel like I'm living in a suburb of my own life. The alarm goes off and I want to sleep, but I have a responsibility, an obligation. So I get out of bed, I figure out I'm in the body and the life of a girl named Danielle. I get dressed. I try to avoid imagining what Rhiannon is doing. 2 hours time difference, 2 hours in a world away. As you can imagine, if this book is to have a plot, A does not stay far away for very long. And so I did say this is a collaboration, and it was interesting because there have been 8 years since I wrote the first book. And there was a movie that came out. And it was really interesting to see that this book is very much a response to many things. I'm collaborating with myself in that I laid something down and now I'm pulling from it again. I'm collaborating with a different interpretation. I loved the movie version of Every Day, unabashedly. And there are parts of it that I think actually improved the book that I wish I'd put in the book. And so it was interesting to have that tone and have those actors in my mind as I was writing or finishing up this book. But also I've had so many conversations about Every Day and about the fact that we shouldn't be defined by our bodies, that gender is absolutely not binary and that you should be able to choose whatever gender you want, and about the fact that we oftentimes subjugate our own definitions of self because of the way other people see us and how we have to fight back against that on many different levels. And so all of that, as well as the current political climate where making moral choices is more important now than ever, that all came into this book, which is why it's longer than the other two books. So as promised, that's my overview. Now is the awkward period where I'm like, oh, let's open up to questions, and nobody necessarily has gotten to the mics yet. People might be hesitant. It's great because I'm blind right now, so I can't even tell if there's somebody at the mics. And so if it looks like I'm gauzily out there, is there anybody at the, okay, people are going. That's good. That's promising. I can see people moving. There's movement. That's awesome. So yeah, usually it's awkward. Nobody wants to ask the first question. And there are 2 mics. All right, so we're going to try to get through as many questions as possible. There's nothing worse than the author who's like, I love questions, then gets one question and gives a 20-minute answer. So we are going to start with the blur over here.
Thank you. I'll keep it nice and objective. How many drafts do you usually go for before you send a book off to publishers?
I'm actually, my writing process is very crazy in that I will write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite the first 3 chapters because I need the foundation for my book. So those chapters will go through 20 drafts at least. But then once I get momentum and once I'm moving, with the latest book, Someday, I had read the first 3 chapters about 20 times. I had read the first half of the book twice, and then I'd only actually read over the entirety of the book once before I sent it to my editor. And I do send it to my editor fairly early in the process because I want to have that conversation with her. But usually for me, it is focus on what you want this book to be, who the characters are, what it's going to sound like, and then once you've fixed that into place, then just run with it. And don't go back and don't draft and redraft until you have something that's done. But that's just me.
Thank you.
All right, over here.
I was wondering if you could speak about how much influence or like if you had any say in like production and stuff for the movie.
I had nothing whatsoever to do with the movie. I was extraordinarily lucky because they actually hired Jesse Andrews, who is an amazing YA author in his own right, to write the screenplay. So I was like, cool, ask my friend to write the screenplay. That works well. And he just knew the rhythms. Both his book and his movie adaptation of his own book, From Me, Earl and the Dying Girl, is one of my favorite movies of all time and one of the best adaptations I've ever seen. So I was like, if he could actually adapt his own book, he could do it for me. But really, I let them do what they wanted to do. I did get to sort of talk to him, and there were a few things. He's like, how about this? And I was like, I don't know about that. And I did get to see a rough cut of the movie and give comments, and there was one thing that was in the movie that I didn't want to be in there, and they actually did take it out. So that's the extent of the involvement I had. But most of the time, I'm of the mind that the exciting part is you're giving the story to somebody else and seeing what they do with it. And so far, I've been lucky that every adaptation I've had has brought something new to it that I've liked.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, over here.
Hello.
Hey.
What gave you the original idea for like this being that doesn't have any gender or any binariness, I guess?
Yes. I would love, somebody once asked that question in the form of, is this based on your real life? And I was like, no, it is not. So it's not autobiographical. But no, really, I wish there was a better origin story. Other books of mine have so much better origin stories, but this one, I was just walking to work one day, feeling whatever I was feeling about my own body. I thought, whoa, what would it be like to switch bodies every day? Who would you be if you were never one set body? And it was just that thought and that premise that A was born from. I did not understand any of the implications of what that would mean for A until I started writing the book. And really, I wrote the book to answer the question of who would you be if you weren't defined by your body. But the spark was just that premise, that question to myself of what would life be like if you weren't judging me based on what you're seeing right now.
Thank you.
Over there?
Hi. So I am a special education literacy teacher at a middle school here in DC.
Awesome.
And I'm constantly just like so grateful, even as a young teacher, at seeing the growth from when I was in middle school to now, and how much diversity there is in the books that are easily accessible to my kids. So my question there is really, what areas do you think we've done a really great job in expanding the kinds of characters in YA, and what areas do you still see the biggest gaps in?
Oh, I mean, I think there's still so much work to be done, although it is incredible to see how far we've come. If you, I'm sure, look at the schedule for the first of these festivals and the schedule for now, you will see a much wider, more diverse range, because that's what publishing has done. That's not about the festival, it's about publishing in general. I think really it's about intersectionality. It is about talking about all the different experiences within one group. So yes, it is great we have so many queer novels, but so many of those queer novels still are about white middle-class Simons. And I love white middle-class Simons. And let's face it, in the movie, Simon's actually upper class, but that, which is great. I mean, I was one of those boys, like absolutely, but we actually absolutely have to see so many other experiences that are queer experiences. And there are so many exciting writers right now who are writing into that space. At Scholastic is not a book I edited, but we published a book called Hurricane Child for middle grade that is this amazing queer novel by Corinne Callender, who has a YA coming out this fall. And just there are all these new writers and new voices coming out that I think are going to continue to say there is no such thing as one queer identity or one black identity or one just any identity you choose. There are so many different perspectives within that identity, and we have to publish and reflect as many of those experiences as we can. So thanks. All right, over here.
Hi, I just want to say that I really loved The Realm of Possibility.
Oh, thank you.
And I was wondering kind of how you managed to get all those characters that were so interesting, and how you like figured out how they each kind of were written, because they had like prose, and it was different, and I loved it.
Well, thank you. So Realm of Possibility was my second book. It is my only book that's entirely in poetry, including some prose poems, but it is told from the point of view of 20 different kids who all go to the same high school. And that, honestly, I just made it up as I went along and played with the different characters and didn't start piecing together how they were connected until about halfway through. I just wanted to see which voices would come up, and the poetry forms really led me very well to the voices. I started that, honestly, because as an editor, I was editing different poetry memoirs. A book by my best friend, Billy Merrill, called Talking in the Dark, a book called You Remind Me of You by Aaron Corrigan for the Push imprint that Sydney mentioned. And so I was so drenched in poetry as a reader and an editor that just it started to express itself in my work. And also, it was my second book, and I had written this really dippy, happy romantic comedy about two gay boys called Boy Meets Boy. And so I wanted my second book to be as different from that in form as possible, just to prove that I could write different things. And so writing 20 different voices in verse was how it went. But really, for me, my writing mind works by just seeing what comes out and then forming it, rather than thinking about it and planning it out. So for that one, the voices just came to me, and I figured out how they fit in. But
Awesome.
I'm so glad
Thank
you
you.
like it. Thanks. All right, over there.
Hi. One of the books of yours that I really loved was Will Grayson. And that meant a lot to, that book meant a lot to me. So I was kind of just wondering, like, what the core of that story was to you. Like, if you had to sum it up, what do you think was the most important part of it?
I mean, it's called Will Grayson. If you have not read it, it is about two boys with the same name. One of them was written by John Green, one by me. And I think because it was based on the fact that when I was in college, there was a kid walking around named David Levithan, and we would be mistaken for each other. And so I always thought that was an interesting zoom into your own identity when there's somebody who's like you, even in something as superficial as your name, around. And so John and I really wanted to explore that, and about sort of what makes you tick. For my Will Grayson, it's very much about making it through the middle. That he knows he's gay, but he doesn't really feel he needs to like come out in a huge way. So he's okay with it. He just doesn't want anyone to bother him about it. He is dealing with his depression and is on medication, and it's working, but it is something he still has to navigate. But it's not about him finding out. It's about him navigating. And so for me, it's about that state. It's about when you know what's going on and you're managing and you're dealing with it and you're getting through it and you meet the people you need to meet in order to help you get through it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I wondered if you could talk more about gender in your writing. I know you said Every Day wasn't an autobiographical, but you still had to write a lot of different genders. And I noticed in Sam and Elsa's Last Hurrah, you're writing Sam, who's a boy. So how would you, or I assume is a boy, so how would you write someone, do you have a lot of experience with writing people of different genders, and how do you manage writing people of different genders and like figuring that out when it's a different experience than yours?
I mean, I think it is, there are three answers here. I mean, certainly writing from the point of view of a gay male, that is who I am. So that's easy to do. Pieces of me come in. But pieces of me come in the other ways too. With A, it's writing about somebody who isn't defined by gender and who has never been defined by gender. And that, obviously, you need that supernatural conceit to get to that person. And that really was thinking a lot about non-binary, thinking a lot about trans issues, and talking to my friends who identify as both. And also just, again, thinking theoretically about it as well. When I do write from a female point of view, like Rhiannon for Another Day, or sometimes with the books with Rachel, we will take each other's characters. So in Naomi and Eli's No Kiss List, I'm Naomi. Again, I feel that hopefully I've been paying enough attention to the females in my life that I understand a little bit where they're coming from, but I'm also very confident in that I know that my female editor or my female co-author will, if I get something wrong, tell me, dude, you got something wrong, and then we will fix it. So I think you absolutely should write outside your own voice, but you should always do your research and always do it respectfully, and there should always be a reason you've chosen to do it that way. And that's, with my writing, what I try to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so I know you said that you love to collaborate on different works. How do you choose who you want to collaborate with, or do they come to you?
I mean, it all happens sort of, the universe just throws it our way. With Rachel, it was she had tried to write a novel that had a he said and a she said, and she tried to do both, and she was like, I want to actually write with a male writer doing the he said part, and I was luckily the best male writer friend she had, and I said yes. With John, it was just, I really loved his books, he loved my books. I was like, I have this crazy idea, and we ran with it. With Andrea Kramer, who I wrote Invisibility with, we were actually doing an event with John. The first time we met, by the 15th minute of our event, I was singing You've Lost That Loving Feeling to her on the stage, which is usually a good sign that you're getting along. And that night, jokingly, she blogged and said, when is David Levithan going to write a book with, with me about something supernatural? And I was like, aha. And I wrote the first chapter of a book about an invisible boy and emailed it to her out of the blue, being like, all right, gauntlet thrown, you're on. And so that's how that happened. Don't go home and blog now, that's been done. But yeah, so it's just random things bring people together. Nina LaCour, who I wrote You Know Me Well with, deliberately, we were saying that we don't like how queer books are often separated into like the lesbian section and the gay boy section. It's much more nuanced and complicated than that. And so I was like, let's write a back and forth about a lesbian girl and a gay boy, obviously not falling in love with each other. And like, let's play around with this. Like, let's do a romantic comedy where the two leads are not going to end up together for very good reasons, and really write a book that is as queer as it can be from as many queer perspectives as possible. So sometimes there's a reason for that too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I have two questions. Do you want one that's slightly less complicated or a complicated one?
We have little time left, so let's go for the slightly less complicated.
Do you have any advice for young writers who want to write more diverse than what they usually read?
I mean, I think it is try to have as diverse a life as possible and draw from as many experiences as you can get, that nobody is going to write effectively from other points of view if they only know people who are like themselves and only interact with people who are like themselves. And you have to be out in the world and pay attention respectfully. You're not meeting people just so you can use their stories. You are meeting people hopefully to understand their stories more and share that experience more. And so I think it is just challenging yourself and to push, and also to find the things you have in common. It is always, I can find something massively in common with a character who changes bodies every day, because I also have feelings of, why am I being defined by who I am on the outside? Why am I not being seen by who I am on the inside? So that's somebody I am not, but it's somebody I can connect to. And I think to effectively write, you always have to have a connection to the characters, whether it is through your own experience or it is through people that you know and love. So that would be my advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, over here.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm a little too short for the mic, so I'm going to have to tiptoe. But I'm a second-year student, and I go to school here in DC, and I'm taking this class on writing and culture. And my professor discussed this book called And Tango Makes Three, which is a children's picture book. It's about two gay penguins, and they adopt an egg, and it's really cute. Everyone should read it. But then we were discussing this idea of censorship and agency and morality, and like who gets to have their say in what gets to be put in bookshelves in our classes, in our libraries, and all of that. So how do you respond to that as a writer? Because I know some of your books have been on the challenged book list, and what does that make you feel? Or like, what do you think is the purpose of libraries? Like, should they be acting as moral compasses, or like, is it just, enough for them to just be a place of like information dissemination? I'm sorry, that was a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a library and a school library always have responsibilities to reflect the world and everybody in it, and that's every viewpoint, everybody in it. And we certainly can discuss what is in there, but they have a moral obligation to really represent both the people who are in their communities, but also people who are not in their communities. And so I think that Tango Makes Three is a great example where it's a true story of these two male penguins who raised this baby penguin, but it has been on the banned books list on and off for about 20 years. And it is the classic case, as with most censorship, where the people attacking the book are really attacking the thing behind the book. In this case, the fact that we gay people exist in the world. And they are under the misbegotten belief, A, that if they get rid of the book, suddenly it will just go away. And also the fact that if they attack a book can't defend itself. The really great news is that 97, I believe, times out of 100, the book does defend itself and stays on the shelves. That although we do have a culture of book challenges here in America that is unlike anywhere else in the world, we also have a massive success rate of people defending books. So if you think that by taking that book about the gay penguins off the shelves, the community will just ignore the fact that there are gay people around, instead it actually causes people to defend the book, defend the identity, and also have the conversation that the people who tried to ban the book wanted to avoid in the first place. So I like that the system works that way.
Thank you.
All right, we have 2 minutes, so very quickly, rapid fire.
I'm going to preface this by saying I tried to get my sister to ask this question. She didn't want to. I'm being bribed to ask this.
Okay.
What, in your opinion, is the scariest sea creature?
I have no idea, but after hearing Alex Bracken, I'm really scared of scorpions. That's all I can say. All right, next question.
Yeah, well, this one sort of piggybacks off of it, but when did you get Boy Meets Boy published?
It was 15 years ago.
Okay, yeah. And considering how long ago that was, I mean, what were the challenges of trying to find a publisher? Because I know even, especially back then and even to a certain extent today, there's a certain amount of people who still believe that LGBT stuff is adult, even if there's no actual, sexual activity or anything, even if it's just these two people are in a relationship. So what were the challenges of getting it published?
Well, the good news is that almost none of those people work for publishers. Publishers, no, and I work for one. Random House was the first queer young adult book that they had published, Random House children's book, but they were like gung-ho. They're like, it's about time, let's do this. And certainly there were gay books before mine that led the way. There are gay books after mine that carried it on. We are in a beautiful continuum. And so so I think that you should never be hesitant about writing for queer identities, because those are the people who are out there, and that is the books that publishers want to find, and again, want to find as many variations of the story as possible. All right, I think we have time for one more, very quickly.
Yeah, so I've been like literally, like I came here because I knew you'd wrote Boy Meets Boy, but I was like literally, when I was reading your stuff about like not being in the same body all the time and not being defined by your body, I was like literally Googling like all your books during the presentation. And then what I found fascinating was that every day and another day were basically the same book, except written in the point of view of two different characters. Like, how did you decide on that?
I mean, very quickly, it really was, I felt that Rhiannon's voice, although it came out in the first book, needed to come out more. And so it was going through everything that happened in the first book and just seeing it through her eyes, and that's what I wrote down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. All right, we are now out of time, unfortunately, but I'm signing from 3 to 4 downstairs, so please come by. I'm happy to sign as many books as you want and to talk to you and answer any questions that didn't get to be asked. Thanks.